Welcome to this week's video tutorial with Virtual Racing School for the Porsche iRacing Cup. The series visits the formidable Mount Panorama circuit in Bathurst this week, which will present a real challenge of attrition, I'm sure. I'll be analysing a lap driven by Rens Broekman, who as usual run in default morning weather on race fuel. We'll first play the lap through in full before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was a 2-minute 05.402. So as ever from the VRS app, we've got data packs selected and we're going to choose the Porsche as driven by Rens Broekman. And we'll choose week 2, which loads the Bathurst session details, where of course you can download the lap data, the replay and the setup. We're just going to click on Learn Track, which will load up the video analyzer, where I'll pause it, and we can see the steering trace and the speed trace, as well as the brake and throttle input traces at the bottom, and some live driver inputs. So VRS splits up the lap into different sectors, and we're going to click on Sector 1 to start things off, which is of course the run to turn 1 from the start finish line, which I'll just play this through for you now. Obviously you're thinking about your braking point for turn 1 at this moment. Keep the car to the right hand side and look for this 100 braking marker on the right here. So we'll go to sector 2, braking quite hard for this just before the marker board, and holding those brakes, keeping the car to the right until significantly after the 50 board, so turning in fairly late here. Very important to get a good exit, so just hold on to those brakes, keep the front end loaded up. Pretty basic stuff here, and make sure that you hook up with that apex as you get on the throttle. A modulation of throttle there, we're in 3rd gear, slightly traction limited, and we reach full throttle just before we reach the outside exit curb, which Rens on this occasion chooses not to actually run. It is quite aggressive, so you do lose traction if you drop a wheel over onto this AstroTurf, so just be aware of that. we'll speed it up for the run down Mountain Straight towards Griffin's Bend. Just gradually bring the car over to the left hand side, thinking about your braking point, which is going to be shortly after this white wall ends, but it's going to be before this 100 marker, significantly before this time. So uphill braking zone, you could afford to brake really hard for this one, relatively speaking. For the Porsche, we'll just slow it down, sustaining that braking, turning in fairly early given the corner, so the corner's quite cambered into the apex, so you want to just be aware of those bumps as you apex. And notice how again Rens bleeds off the brake almost entirely until here before the apex, but then holds onto that brake pedal all the way until the point where he's back on the throttle again, which is just before the apex. We'll just take it externally here. So you need to get really close to this curb on the inside, but don't actually make contact with it. So that's a really nice line there. And you should be at full throttle by the time the curb ends. And open the steering up, open the car up, use all of the track on the exit up near this wall on the exit, and bring the car over to the right hand side again, nice and close to this wall. You want to start turning in just before this sector ends. You can see here in the steering trace that Rens just starts to turn in just before the Armco on the right hand side. We'll go to sector 4, and he is lifting off the throttle completely and dabbing the brakes, but you'll notice shortly after that he's coasting for a period of time. We'll just play that through, so dabbing the brakes but then coasting as he gets right up close to that inside wall. And the reason for that is when you are coasting, the car is in its most stable condition. So if you're on the brakes, the front engine is loaded up and the car has a tendency to oversteer, so it just keeps the car nice and settled. As the circuit goes uphill again quite steeply, and the circuit straightens out briefly before it tightens again into the cutting, Rens eases into the brake pedal nice and gently and slows the car down, allows the car to run out a little bit wide. We're just wide of centre, but not all the way to the outside wall here on the entry. Hold those brakes, slow the car down. You want to hug this inside wall on the left. Again, the circuit's very, very cambered in towards this wall here. Take advantage of that and pick up the throttle as you're halfway around here. But notice in second gear, Rens is traction limited at this point, so you can only reach about 75-80% throttle without inducing wheel spin, so that's quite important. And then as the car straightens up, Rens straightens the wheel nicely and then gets to full throttle, and he's going to maintain full throttle until he reaches the next curb through the uphill right-hander, which is just going to ensure, which there's a nasty bump there as well as the car goes light, as well as the circuit kind of crests slightly, and that allows Rens to stay full throttle, running the car all the way up to this outside Fujitsu sponsored wall, really close to the wall there, using all of the road on the entry to the next uphill right quarry corner. And we'll just take it through to sector 5 for this. And now Rens will have another lift out of the throttle, but he'll be back in the throttle well before apexing. So you'll just see this is off the throttle now to get the car hooked up where it needs to be, but is long gone full throttle by the time he apexes. So we'll just go back to there. So he's at full throttle well before the apex, and that allows him to stay completely flat out through this S or chicane. It does throw him really close to the wall on the exit here. You can see that there. And then obviously the car runs out towards the outside wall, but not completely. So Rens is kind of in the middle of the circuit at this point as he heads downhill, keeping it flat out over the crest. And we go to sector 6. So just after the circuit heads downhill, Rens is back off the throttle again, and once again he's just squeezing the brake pedal to set the car up. Notice how on the entry, using all of the track again right up next to this outside wall, the speed is reduced to where he wants it to be, coasting through here to keep the car stable, but picking up the throttle before the apex, reaching full throttle before the exit, and again using all of the track on the exit as well. You've got a curb here which kind of protects yourself ever so slightly against this wall, and then into Solomon Park, McPhillamy Park. We're going to sector 7, and you want to turn in just off this curb on the right. Again, a slight dab of brakes just to get the speed down to where Rens wants it to be, coasting in on entry, and then squeezing the brakes just enough to tuck the front end in. But you'll see that Rens is off the brakes a little bit too soon, and as a result doesn't quite hook up with the apex quite as well as he could have done so, which is what's provoked this lift here. It's kind of a feather, more of a feather, and puts him in this dangerous situation where he's up onto this curb on the exit. He's able to get away with it, but it's quite a risky situation. So if he just held onto those brakes a little bit longer, picked up the throttle a fraction later, he probably would have been able to get away without so much risk. So towards Skyline now, again bringing the car over to the left hand side before the circuit fully crests at the top of the mountain, lifting off the throttle and squeezing the brakes under the banner, and then just lifting off the brakes ever so slightly to kink to the right to hug that wall, and then as the car compresses back in the circuit into the apex, he's back on the brakes again before immediately coming off the brakes. There's a lot going on here, and Rens doesn't actually reach full throttle again by the time he's exited the dipper all the way down. So you'll see he's bleeding off the brakes again, not fully, just enough to keep the car settled as he rides this curb down the hill into the S's, off the curb, back on the brakes again briefly, slows the car down, and then is just teasing the brakes to keep the front end loaded up, to keep the car hugged nice and tight into this wall. Line is absolutely critical through here, so you need to make sure that you're positioning your car well. Don't be scared of the walls, you need to get really close to them, especially this one. So the car is actually aimed at the inside wall at this point, but it's the momentum of the car that's throwing it onto a wider trajectory, so he misses it. And then the car is going to land heavily into the tarmac just there, and that's the point where Rens picks up the throttle quite hard actually into full throttle, and again on the exit is right up against the wall there. Exiting down the hill, again bring the car over to the left, hugging the wall there, in towards the braking zone for Forrest's elbow. We'll go to sector 9 for this one, and that braking begins now as we exit the left-hander. So just need to tease the brakes into the right-hander, and then as the circuit crests down the hill, drops away, you've got the opportunity here to actually brake a bit harder, but not too hard, for the very reason that the circuit is falling away, and this is why you can't afford to brake too late. But you can brake in a straight line, so that's why you can brake reasonably firmly. So brake in a straight line, and then turn in reasonably early actually, and the reason for that is you want to hook up in this camber again near the apex, and you want to make sure that you make it to this inside wall, to the apex. So you notice how tight Rens has the car here, really hugging that inside wall, and that allows him basically to stamp on the throttle just as he's finished apexing, which as he opens the car up, uses all of the track on the exit, running the car out right up against the wall again that allows him to maximise his exit down Conrod Straight, which is absolutely critical for a good lap time. Just play it through. Time to take a breather at last. Bring the car over to the left gradually towards the chase. Make sure that you clip that apex on the right there, and then hug the inside of the exit as you approach the chase chicane. We'll slow it down again and play it through. Braking into this one, we'll go to sector 10. Isn't really a reference for this, unfortunately. There are some discolorations in the tarmac, and you're considerably before the 150 marker. That's all I can really say. The Porsche has really very long braking zones, so just play it through, sustain that braking pressure. Ren's actually reaching nearly 90% there without locking up, and that's because the circuit starts to rise, so you get a bit more grip from that. So keep the car to the right, wait for the car to slow down. Once you've passed the 50 marker, then you can think about turning in. Bleed off as you turn in, but hold those brakes into the first apex in third gear. Use a little bit of that curb, but try and avoid attacking it too much, because it'll unsettle the car and bump you wide, which will upset the exit. Your traction limited here, so pick up the throttle nicely, but don't be too aggressive with it. Rens is at 70% there before reaching full throttle as he reaches the exit. Again, just running his inside wheels along the curb there into sector 11, which we can see that Rens actually does have a slight confidence lift as he rides along the curb just there, and then doesn't actually use too much of this exit curb on the left. You can use a little bit more of that if you need to, but it's not something that I'd deliberately advise. And then braking into the final corner now, which is going to be shortly before the 100 marker on the right hand side. So braking quite hard for this one, sustaining that brake pressure, and then bleeding off just before this, I think it's a telegraph post, and turning in, it's a lamppost, sorry, and hooking up with the apex. Now you notice here that Rens is actually coasting this time into the apex. I guess that's probably because the car is rotating well enough for him to not need to hug those brakes. Another reason could be that he was a little bit conservative on the brakes and just wanted to finish the lap off. Either way, picking up the throttle as he apexes, traction limited in third gear, so have to be progressive to full throttle as he straightens the car up on the exit and uses that exit curb to complete the lap. You can find all qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Koana Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.